The Marvel Cinematic Universe, a franchise spanning 13 years and more than 20 films. In 2018, Marvel released Avengers Infinity War, a film that brought together several superheroes from previous film franchises, and for many marked the beginning of the end of their time on the silver screen. The film had many beloved characters coming together to tell one cohesive story and fight for one common goal. Many people heralded it as the most ambitious crossover of all time. And that statement is a valid opinion. If you want to break down the MCU into individual franchises, then at the time of Infinity War's release, it featured characters from 9 different franchises. And that's pretty impressive. One story being told using the characters and elements of 9 others, that's not nothing. But 9, that's not even a double digit. If you want to break down each of the aforementioned 9 franchises into individual films, you get 17, which is a double digit, but it's still less than 20, which is the number of source materials used in the actual most ambitious crossover of all time. Theodore Geisel, better known by his pen name Dr. Seuss, started his career as a cartoonist with the publication of a drawing in the Saturday Evening Post in July 1927. The cartoon sold for $25, and this single sale gave Geisel the encouragement he needed to move to New York City, where he soon accepted a job as an illustrator and writer with the humor magazine Judge. After 6 months of working at Judge, Geisel began signing his work as Dr. Seuss. Seuss from his middle name and Doctor as potentially a nod to the fact that prior to pursuing a career as a cartoonist, Geisel had planned to earn a Doctor of Philosophy in English Literature. As a kid, I remember being told that he signed his name Dr. Seuss because his mother had always wanted him to be a doctor, but I couldn't find any sources to back this up. In 1936, Geisel's first children's book was published. Geisel's accounts varied, but he said the book was rejected by between 20 and 43 publishers. The book was actually published by chance. Geisel was walking home with plans to burn the manuscript when he bumped into an old classmate from Dartmouth who had recently been hired by Vanguard Press. This chance encounter led to the publication of Geisel's first children's book, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street. While Mulberry Street is written in the typical poetic rhyming fashion we now associate with Geisel's work, his next 3 books, The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins, The King's Stilts, and The 7 Lady Godivas, were not. Geisel would return to writing in his poetic fashion for his next children's book, Horton Hatches the Egg. If you're wondering why I keep saying children's book and not just book, it's because Geisel's first book was actually published in 1931 and was called Boners. Now get your minds out of the gutter. At the time of its publication, the term boner was slang for a silly mistake. Geisel wrote and illustrated 4 boner books in total, and in 1941 the Readers League of America compiled these 4 books into one, the Pocket Book of Boners. The book consisted of humorous drawings by Geisel as well as short jokes and funny observations. It was one of the best-selling paperback books of the era, with 1.34 million copies in print by 1945. As World War II began, Geisel turned towards political cartoons. I'm sure I'm not the only one who in a high school history class was shown this cartoon condemning isolationists. During World War II, Geisel also drew some posters for the Treasury Department and War Production Board, as well as writing films for training the army, and a propaganda film about peace in Europe after World War II called Our Job in Japan. After the war, Geisel returned to writing children's books, publishing works such as McElligot's Pool and If I Ran the Zoo. In 1954, Life magazine published a report on illiteracy among school children, concluding that children were not learning to read because their books were boring. William Spalding, the then director of education at Houghton Mifflin, compiled a list of 348 words that he felt were important for all first graders to know. He then gave the list to Geisel, asking him to cut it to 250 words and to write a book using only those words, and to, quote, bring back a book children can't put down. 9 months later, Geisel would return with The Cat in the Hat, which used 236 of the words. Geisel would continue to write children's books up until his death in 1991 to cancer. He was 87. In total, he published 81 children's books, 17 of which were published posthumously. Theodore Geisel is one of the most well-known and beloved children's authors of all time. His stories not only teach children the basics of reading and rhyming, but about compassion for others, the importance of the environment, racial equality, anti-authoritarianism, and the dangers of materialism and consumerism. I'm serious. Geisel said that although he never started his stories with a moral in mind, as kids can see a moral coming a mile off, He did believe that there was an inherent moral in any story, and also that he was subversive as hell. In 1996, the musical Ragtime has its world premiere in Toronto at the Toronto Centre for the Arts. The musical is set in the early 20th century and tells the story of three groups in America during that era: African Americans, Eastern European immigrants, and upper-class suburbanites. The musical is based on the 1975 novel of the same name by E.L. Doctorow. The show is produced by Garth Drabinsky, with music by Stephen Flaherty and lyrics by Lynn Ahrens. Now, I want you to remember those names, because we'll be coming back to them soon. Ragtime premieres in the U.S. in 1997 at the Shubert Theater, making the move to Broadway in 1998. The show received mixed reviews, and the company that produced it went bankrupt shortly after its premiere, but it was nominated for 13 Tony Awards, winning 4 of them. Remember those names that I told you to remember earlier? Well, as Ragtime is premiering on Broadway, Garth Drabinsky, the producer of the show, acquires the rights to adapt the books of Dr. Seuss into a musical, and he asks Stephen Flaherty and Lynn Ahrens, who did the music and lyrics respectively for Ragtime, to adapt these Seuss books into a musical. Side note, around this same time, Livent, the company that was producing this Seuss musical, filed for bankruptcy. This eventually led to the company's collapse, but it was also investigated for fraud and forgery. Criminal and civil litigation happened, and many of the company's executives were eventually sentenced to jail, including Garth Drabinsky. So the show was acquired by SFX Theatrical Group, who had taken over for Livent, and they supplied the necessary funds for the show. The show controversially did not have a book writer, with the entire thing instead being written by Ahrens and Flaherty. Also brought on to help conceptualize and write the show was former Monty Python actor and theme park ride star Eric Idle. And so Seussical was born. Seussical draws inspiration from 20 of Dr. Seuss's books, with the most prominent being Horton Hears a Who, Horton Hatches the Egg, The Cat in the Hat, Gertrude McFuzz, If I Ran the Circus, and The Butter Battle Book. The musical takes the plot lines and characters from these books as well as others and intertwines them to tell one cohesive story. I will now tell you that story. There are 4 main characters in Seussical: the boy, the cat in the hat, Horton the elephant, and Gertrude McFuzz. The boy starts out the show, finding the cat's hat on an empty stage. The cat is then imagined up by the boy, which leads us into the opening number, Oh, the Things You Can Think. The cat then sets up the story, encouraging the boy to think up the jungle of Newell. Here we are introduced to Horton the elephant. The next 2 songs basically just follow the plot of the first few pages of Horton Hears a Who. It establishes Horton hearing the Whos on their dust speck and placing them safely on a clover. Horton is then ridiculed by the other jungle animals for believing in the existence of the Whos. This ridicule is encouraged by the sour kangaroo, who is all about maintaining the status quo, and also she hates Horton. This scene also introduces us to Maisie LeBird and Gertrude McFuzz, but we'll get to them later. Horton then begins talking to the dust speck, and we are introduced to the Whos. They sing a song about their home, Whoville, and how hard it is to live on a dust speck. They also mention other Seuss characters, such as the Grinch and the Lorax. After this, the cat pushes the boy into the story, where he takes on the role of Jojo, the mayor's son. Jojo has been getting in trouble at school for having thinks, basically having an overactive imagination and probably some undiagnosed ADHD as well. His parents tell him to take a bath and go to bed and think some normal thinks instead. This leads us into It's Possible, which is one of the best songs in the show. Jojo accidentally floods the house, prompting his parents to yell at him and send him to military school. Jojo is sent to military school, where everyone eats their bread butter side up, and they are preparing to go to war with those who eat their bread butter side down. Jojo is sad at military school and talks to Horton. The two find a kindred spirit in one another and sing Alone in the Universe, the second best song in the show. Then we shift gears totally and in earnest get to meet Gertrude McFuzz, a one-feather-tailed bird. She sings a sad song about that. We're then introduced to another bird, Maisie LeBird, who sings an exciting little number about how Gertrude can get more tail feathers by going to a doctor and getting some pills from him. This scene also establishes that Gertrude has a crush on her next-door neighbor, Horton, and she thinks that Horton doesn't notice her because she only has one tail feather. Scene change. Horton is ambushed by the monkey Wickersham brothers, who steal the clover with the Whos on it from him, giving it to the eagle Vlad Vladikov, who then drops it into a large field of clovers. Horton then begins searching the clover field for the clover with the Whos on it. Then Gertrude comes and sings a song about how she wants Horton to notice her. He doesn't. Horton continues his search for the Whos, but is interrupted by Maisie, who is hatching an egg. She asks Horton to take over hatching the egg for her so that she can have a vacation. Horton agrees and then has some inner turmoil over hatching the egg or continuing the search for the Whos. Then Horton is captured by hunters. Gertrude tries to fly after him, but she is unable to because of how heavy her tail feather now is. And then the Cat in the Hat shows up to sing a song that has the central message of, "Man, aren't you glad that isn't you?" End of Act 1. Act 2 starts with Horton being auctioned off to the Circus McGurkus. While touring with the circus, he runs into Maisie, who insists that he keep the egg. Horton is really bummed about losing the Whos and the fact that he will probably never find them, but he vows to protect the egg. And then we get the best song in the entire musical. It's a lullaby sung by Horton, the mayor's wife, and JoJo, and it's about a magical place called Seussical. Best song in the show. Go listen to it, but not until you've finished watching this video. After this beautiful lullaby, we get to see JoJo go to war. We get a scene of a child soldier deserting the military and disappearing in an explosion. We then go to Whoville, where it is Christmas Eve, and the Grinch is recounting his story of how he learned the true meaning of Christmas. Then a message from the front lines of the butter battle arrives, informing the mayor and his wife that their son is missing and presumed dead. But he's not dead. JoJo survives the explosion and returns home to Whoville. His parents are relieved that he's not dead, and they all forgive each other. The mayor and his wife forgive JoJo for having an overactive imagination, and JoJo forgives his parents for sending him off to die as a child soldier in war. Those are equal offenses, I guess. We then return to Horton. Gertrude sneaks into the circus and frees Horton, and then reveals that she has found his clover and that she loves him. She reveals all of this through song, and the song is called All For You. As Gertrude and Horton make their circus escape, they are captured by the Wickersham brothers, who, if you'll recall from earlier, are the ones who separated Horton from his clover in the first place. The Sour Kangaroo is also there, and she makes a citizen's arrest. So they take Horton back to the jungle of Newell, where he is put on trial for being insane. If found guilty, he will be sentenced to an insane asylum, and the clover with the Whos on it will be boiled in a pot of oil. The entire trial is overseen by Judge Yertle the Turtle. An interesting choice considering the story he's from is about fascism and the subversion of authoritarian rule, and Seuss himself stated that the character of Yertle represented Hitler. But okay, yeah, let's make him a judge. So Horton encourages the Whos to make as much noise as possible, JoJo yaps, and then all the jungle animals hear the Whos, and Horton is acquitted. And then the egg hatches. Remember the egg that Horton was sitting on? It hatches into an elephant with wings, and Horton starts to panic because he cannot fly, so he cannot teach his hybrid son about flying. But then Gertrude offers to help raise the baby. The exact words she says are, "You teach him earth, and I will teach him sky." Then the Cat in the Hat reappears and says the story is over. All the characters and sets vanish, leaving just the cat and JoJo. JoJo is now just the boy, as he was at the beginning of the show. The cat leaves behind his hat, which the boy puts on, uttering the last line of the show, Seuss. Now, the characters in the show are pretty one-dimensional, because they're based on characters from picture books. The source material wasn't exactly giving them a lot to work with. So you have Horton, who is your standard good guy protagonist. Throughout the show, he hits us with the line, "I said what I meant, and I meant what I said." He is an honest and genuine person. He doesn't really have any flaws. He's just nice. He's a nice elephant. And in the original Broadway cast, he was played by Kevin Chamberlain, and Seussical only received one Tony Award nomination, and it was for Best Leading Actor in a Musical, and Kevin Chamberlain was nominated. He lost to Nathan Lane for the producers. Next we have the boy, or JoJo, as he is for most of the show. He's just your standard child character. He's earnest, and his main conflict comes from his relationship with his parents. The entire show could be interpreted as being within the mind of the boy. It's a little bit like the Joker, and how people were like, oh, maybe the whole movie did happen, but Arthur's in an insane asylum at the end, so maybe he lied about the whole thing. Was it real? Was it all his imagination? We'll never know. It's just like that. Or Fight Club. Originally, there was going to be a whole plot line based on Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. It would have had the boy also taking on the role of the boy from that story. He would have met the Onceler after deserting from the military, and he would have received the last truffula tree seed. There would have been an extended sequence basically just recounting the events of the book, with the Onceler, Lorax, Swami Swams, Barbaloots, and Hummingfish all making appearances. This was ultimately cut due to runtime, but it is still referenced in the song Here on Who. So that's the boy. Next is his father, Mr. Mayor, who does nothing. Like, he sings in some of the songs, but he doesn't really do anything. You have General Genghis Khan Schmitz, who is such a non-character. This is the first time I've mentioned him by name. He runs the military academy that JoJo gets sent to. He's like a drill sergeant, but he's barely in the show, and he doesn't really matter to the core plot. We have the Wickersham Brothers, a band of monkeys who seem to be employed by the Sour Kangaroo. They work at her discretion to help maintain the status quo in the jungle of Nool. They are mischievous by nature and are initially introduced as monkeys with trouble in store. They are a small chorus group of boys, and their female counterpart would be the Bird Girls. The Bird Girls sing support for a lot of the songs. At times they act as Maisie's entourage, but their primary function is to serve as a Greek chorus of sorts. Finally, we have the Cat, who is an agent of chaos and orchestrates much of the show. He is described as the host and MC in the opening number, and also says that he'll be running the show. This implies that although the story might be imagined up by the boy, it is at the instruction of the Cat. He is the one truly pulling the strings on this entire operation. He frequently breaks the fourth wall. In fact, he speaks directly to the audience more often than he doesn't. In Whoville, only JoJo can see him. None of the other characters can. The Cat also appears as other characters throughout the show. He is Dr. Dake, who gives Gertrude the tail feather growing pills. He is a piano player. He is a news anchor. He is the auctioneer that sells Horton to the Circus McGurkus. He is also Mr. McGurkus, the owner and operator of the Circus McGurkus. He is Jose, the pool boy, in the reprise of How Lucky You Are. And he is the bench clerk at the trial of the People versus Horton the Elephant. What I'm saying is that the Cat in the Hat is the Loki of the Seuss extended universe. You might have noticed that with the exception of the Bird Girls, I only talked about the male characters in Seussical. In 2013, the movie Syrup was released in theaters. The film was directed by Aram Rappaport and based on the 1999 novel of the same name by Max Barry. Both the novel and film are satirical comedies that mock consumerism and marketing techniques. A brief scene from the film has the character Six, played by Amber Heard, explaining that men categorize women into one of 4 categories: mother, slut, virgin, bitch. And what do you know? The 4 female characters of Seussical fit into those categories. Let's start with Mrs. Mayor. She is the wife of the mayor and JoJo's mom. And that's it. She gets a few lines in different songs. She does sing in Sala Salute, the best song in the musical, so I have to give her some credit for that. But she doesn't really do anything. She is our mother character. Next we have the Sour Kangaroo, and although she is a mother, she is not our mother character. There are a ton of Seussical videos online, and it's really fun to go and watch the scenes with the Sour Kangaroo, because sometimes her baby is a puppet with the actress doing both parts, but sometimes her baby is a live human actor, and sometimes it's a live human actor with a puppet. You get a lot of variety with the Sour Kangaroo and her baby. But the Sour Kangaroo, let's look at her character beats. Also, I will be referring to her as SK to save both time and effort. Our introduction to her is in the opening number. She is described as a kangaroo sour as can be. Next, she's in Biggest Blame Fool. The thesis of this song is conformity. SK has the line, "Somebody's thinking different than us," really hammering home that diversion from the norm will be met with ridicule and abuse. We later see her in Chasing the Who's. This is the song where the clover is taken from Horton and thrown off a cliff, presumably killing all the inhabitants of Whoville. The Sour Kangaroo delights in this, pleased at the genocide she has just witnessed. Next we see her, she narrates Horton being kidnapped by hunters and sold to the circus. It's unclear if she is actually in this scene or simply acting as a narrator recounting events. Her next character beat is kidnapping Horton. Her and the Wickersham brothers kidnap him and put him on trial. If you'll recall, they accuse him of insanity with the plan to imprison him in an insane asylum and boil the clover with the Who's on it in a vat of bezelnut oil, killing them all. But then the Who's make a bunch of noise, JoJo yops, and everyone that put Horton on trial is just like, damn, sorry about all that. SK and her baby promise to help protect the Who's, and everyone's fine with that. Horton's like, okay, sounds great. He's fine with this kangaroo that tried to have him arrested and kill all his friends. They're fine. They're friends now. And it's not like this was a new character development for SK. It's not like Horton hearing the Who's was a final straw for her. When we are introduced to her, she is called the Sour Kangaroo. This is already who she was as a character. So she's our bitch character. Next is Maisie. You can probably guess where I'm going with this one. Maisie sings a fun little almost salsa number about how she took some pills to get a tail full of feathers. Next we see her, she's hatching an egg. She sings to Horton about how he's really lucky that he doesn't have to hatch an egg. She then sings a song about a trip to Fort Worth where she met Tweet McFurth, a fellow bird. The two spent 3 weeks together. He then flew off, leaving Maisie with the egg. You'll recall that Maisie convinces Horton to sit on her egg for her so that she can take a little vacation. While on vacation, she sees Horton at the circus hatching her egg. Horton begs Maisie to take the egg back, saying that he has sat on the egg for 51 weeks. Apparently Seussical takes place over a longer period of time than I thought, because there are only 52 weeks in an entire year. But Maisie says no. She leaves. She says that she has places to be, and that it was great to see Horton, and that he's a big success because she let him sit on her egg, and then she just leaves. So we have a female character who sings kinda sultry songs and has a child as the result of a short fling, and then abandons that child with someone else. So yeah, Maisie is our slut character. Next is Gertrude. She is our virgin character, but she gets her own section. Gertrude is, in my opinion, the worst character in Seussical. In the original story, like the picture book by Dr. Seuss, the motivation for Gertrude wanting more tail feathers is that she's jealous of another bird, Lola Lee Lou. Gertrude then goes to a doctor and gets pills to make more tail feathers grow. She eats too many pills, causing her tail to become so heavy that she cannot fly or walk. The doctor calls for help, and the excess tail feathers are plucked. At the end of the story, Gertrude is left with only one tail feather, but she feels that is enough because now she is smarter. In Seussical, the motivation for Gertrude to get more tail feathers is to impress Horton, who she has a crush on. So she goes to the doctor, gets the pills from the pillberry bush, and grows more tail feathers. She then goes to show Horton her new tail. She sings a whole song about it. It is called Notice Me, Horton. This song comes at the point in the show where the clover with the Who's on it has been lost and Horton is searching for them in the large clover field. Gertrude sings for Horton to put down the clover and notice her. I get that her whole character is that she has this unrequited love for Horton, but ma'am, he is trying to save an entire civilization from the brink of destruction. Maybe consider the struggles here and evaluate which one should be given priority. But he doesn't notice her tail. And then later when Horton is kidnapped by hunters, she is unable to fly after him because her tail is too heavy. After this, she goes and gets the excess tail feathers plucked. It's implied that she does this because she was unable to help Horton. She was unable to fly after him when he was kidnapped. But Horton never noticed her tail in the first place. And it kind of makes you wonder if Horton had been like, gee, Gertrude, that's a real swell tail feather you got there, if she would have been as willing to part with it. But then Gertrude goes to the circus to rescue Horton. She sings a song about all the dangerous situations she was in to try and find him, almost costing her life and limb. It's a lot. She says that there's nothing she wouldn't do for Horton. A man that she has exchanged a few words with and isn't even friends with. Gertrude never refers to Horton as her friend. He is always her neighbor. And I don't really know any of my neighbors. I will sometimes see them when I go to check the mail, but if I were somewhere and one of my neighbors came up to me and sang a song about all the life-threatening situations they went through to try and find me, I would move. So Gertrude sings a song about how everything she does is for Horton. It's like a worse version of that scene in Love Actually where Alan Rickman is dancing at the Christmas party with the employee that he's going to cheat on his wife with, and she leans in and whispers, "It's all for you." And you're like, don't cheat on your wife, Alan Rickman. But then he does, and then his wife finds out. So later in the film, we get a scene of Emma Thompson crying in her bedroom on Christmas Eve, listening to Joni Mitchell. And then she goes to straighten the duvet, and I'm crying, and you're crying, and we're all crying, and Joni Mitchell is singing both sides now. It's like that. But finally, Gertrude also reveals that she found the clover with the Who's on it. I am unsure how she was able to do this, because it is established earlier that only Horton can hear the Who's. It's because he has such big ears. None of the other jungle residents can hear them. Gertrude cannot hear the Who's. In the song Biggest Blame Fool, she says that she is Horton's neighbor and that he is a nice person, so she doesn't think he could be crazy, because the two are mutually exclusive. So, if she couldn't hear the Who's, I am unsure how she was able to find the clover they were on. I am willing to suspend my disbelief for literally everything else in the show except this. During Horton's trial, she just keeps trying to object to what the other jungle residents are saying. Each time she is overruled by a Hitler turtle, and then after Horton is acquitted, she offers to help raise his hybrid son. There is no comment from Horton about what this means for them, if they are now dating, or just friends, or just co-parenting a child. If they are only getting together so they can co-parent a child, that is a terrible idea. Multiple studies have shown that. So Gertrude's whole goal throughout the show is to get Horton to be with her romantically, and that goal is actually never accomplished, unless you want to count raising a child together as proof of a relationship. And in that case, Timon and Pumbaa from The Lion King and Lestat and Louie from Interview with the Vampire are both in relationships. So yeah, Gertrude's entire character is to just fawn after Horton, who doesn't give her the time of day. He's clearly not interested, and yet she just keeps chasing after him. Oh, but if you're like, why is Gertrude our virgin character? She's an ingenue who's inexperienced in love and only has eyes for one man. Now, I could just point out the problems in the writing of the female characters and move on, but I like to consider myself a problem solver, so let's solve this problem. Mrs. Mayer, I'm not really gonna touch. She's about as involved in the story as her husband. They have the exact same amount of stage time, so that's fine. I don't really have any beef with her. I'm even okay with the sour kangaroo. She's an antagonist, so she doesn't need to be particularly likable or anything. And the motivation behind her actions is that she wants to maintain the status quo in the jungle, which is fine for motivation. She's pretty faithful in characterization and actions to her book counterpart, so she's fine. The sour kangaroo can stay as is. My real beef is with the birds. I have bird beef. And most of my bird beef could be resolved by tweaking various relationship dynamics. Let's start with Maisie. Maisie is like your stereotypical popular girl character. She's pretty and vivacious, and everyone loves her. In the song Biggest Blame Fool, where everyone is just roasting Horton, Maisie has the line, "Enough about Horton, let's talk about me." So she's self-centered, and she has her entourage of bird girls. But I would say that Maisie is actually the most complex character in the show. She doesn't actively bully Horton about the Who's. The only other character who doesn't bully him is Gertrude, but she has a crush on Horton, so that's her motivation. Maisie doesn't. She doesn't defend Horton, but she doesn't condone him either. She remains neutral on the situation. She tells Gertrude how to get a bigger tail feather unprompted. Gertrude sings a song about how she's sad that she only has one tail feather, and Maisie shows up with a solution to her problem. Maisie does abandon her egg with Horton, but when she does this, she's kinda self-aware about it. She says that she knows she's irresponsible and unreliable, but then she says that seeing the egg with Horton makes her feel like she's done something right. If we take this at face value, this is Maisie acknowledging her flaws and the fact that she would not make a good mother. She knows that by giving the egg to Horton, when it hatches, it will be taken care of by someone kind and nurturing. Although her initial motivations might have been selfish, she ultimately comes to feel that she truly is doing what is best for the egg. So Maisie, I would say, is a morally gray character. And my whole beef with Gertrude is that her entire character is just having an unrequited love for Horton, and then that love is never even resolved in the show. And here's my hot take. Not all stories need romances in them. I actually think trying to just insert a love plotline into a story tends to hurt it more than help it. Case in point, Newsies on Broadway. So I would just remove the romance plotline altogether. This is how you fix it. You make Horton and Gertrude friends. They're really good friends. You can still have Gertrude defending Horton when the other jungle residents call him crazy. You could have a scene where Horton goes to Gertrude for advice about the Who's. Just really establish the fact that Horton and Gertrude are friends. Then we use the original motivation from the Seuss book for why Gertrude wants more tail feathers. Maisie has a lot of tail feathers and everyone loves her. Just have Gertrude's motivation be that she wants to receive attention in the same way that Maisie does. So then, once she gets more tail feathers, maybe she does start to get some more attention, but it's not a lot. It's at the very least not what she expected. Then when Horton is looking for the Who's in the clover patch, Gertrude shows up to show off her tail. Horton does notice it, but he doesn't fawn over her the way that she's hoping. This is because to him, she's still just Gertrude, his friend. And for some added conflict, maybe they can get into an argument about it. We can still have that same thing where Gertrude can't save Horton from the hunters because her tail is too heavy, and then she goes to get help from the other jungle residents. But they don't really care because they don't care about Horton. And then we can have Gertrude have this realization that she was misguided in wanting to change herself in the hopes of receiving attention from others, because they don't really care about her as an individual. But Horton does care because he's her friend. And then she gets the feathers plucked and goes to save Horton from the circus. She still sings a song about it, but this time the song is about how Horton is her friend and friends help each other out, because friendship is the most powerful force of all, and also it's what's on the inside that counts. And then the rest of the show plays out pretty much the same. But now we have a character whose motivations are driven by her own desire for attention from others, and hers is a journey of self-acceptance. It's not a perfect fix, but it would at least establish a relationship between Horton and Gertrude and make it seem like them caring about each other is mutual, unlike the one-sided version we currently have. Another way to fix the plot would be that instead of that thing where I was like, make Horton and Gertrude friends, it's make Maisie and Gertrude friends. And maybe at least in Act 1, Maisie can serve as like a wing woman to Gertrude in her attempts to woo Horton. This would at least add some comedy, because right now in all of her appearances, Gertrude just looks like a sad, lonely loser. In the current show, Gertrude doesn't have any friends, and you watch it like, if a friendless, annoying bird were trying to woo me, I too would probably not respond. But giving her a wing woman would at least spice things up and provide some comedy. Because now, Gertrude is a likable enough character that she has friends. She even has a best friend who's trying to help the boy she's pining after notice her. And everyone loves the character dynamic of person A being loud and outgoing and person B being more quiet and reserved, but they're friends regardless. It adds some nice contrast. I also like the idea of Maisie serving as a wing woman to Gertrude because they're both birds, so that's funny. If you or a loved one is involved in any kind of community theater or did theater in high school, you've probably been in a production of Seussical. I was in Seussical when I was in 4th grade. I played a Who, and I would put an image here, but there are genuinely no pictures from this production. In high school, I helped out at a summer camp where kids put on a production of Seussical. I worked it with a friend of mine who had been in that same Seussical production I had been in as a youth. I honestly do not remember much about working that camp. I know that we hot glued a lot of props, and we cleaned out the auditorium light booth, but I'm sure the kids put on a stunning performance, really brought the house down. I did a little Instagram poll about Seussical, collected some data, and my data shows that of those polled, 1 in 5 have been in a production of Seussical, and of those people, about 30% have been in more than one production. And even of those that said they had never been in a production of Seussical, I got messages saying that although they hadn't been in a production, they had a friend or sibling who had, or their school had done the show. In 2020, Seussical was the 6th most performed musical in high schools across America. Why is this show so popular? Well, the show is pretty kid-friendly, so there are no concerns over content warnings or appropriateness for different ages. The full version of Seussical, which I gave a plot summary of earlier, has a runtime of about 90 minutes. There is a junior version of the show, which has a runtime closer to 60 minutes. This is achieved by cutting verses from various songs, making them shorter in general, as well as cutting all mentions of the Grinch and the Lorax, and cutting the entire Butter Battle plotline where JoJo is a child soldier. An even shorter version, called Seussical Kids, has a runtime of about 30 minutes. This is achieved by cutting the songs Biggest Blame Fool, Amazing Maisie, and Notice Me Horton from the already shortened and simplified junior version. This version of the show essentially cuts everything that does not have a direct impact on the Horton plotline. So there are multiple versions of the show for groups of different ages and skills. On top of that, the characters are instantly recognizable because they come from Dr. Seuss. Everyone knows who the Cat in the Hat is, so there's that built-in knowledge of who the characters are. Also, there's variety in the casting. Earlier I mentioned that sometimes the Sour Kangaroo's baby is a puppet, but sometimes it's another human actor, so that's an additional role for your production to have. The chorus of Who's and the chorus of Jungle Animals are not gender specific. JoJo is usually played by a boy, but can be played by a girl. The Cat in the Hat can be played by a boy or a girl. So this is a show with a lot of parts for girls, and in my experience, the girls tend to outnumber the boys about 3-1 in most theater groups for kids. It's a show with not only a lot of songs for the chorus to be in, but there are a lot of main roles in general. It's perfect if you don't want a production that only showcases the acting and singing chops of like 3 people. And because it is such a chorus-heavy show, it's perfect for groups that don't want to cut anyone from casting. I think all these factors really contribute to the longevity of Seussical. I mean, the show was widely panned by critics and suffered huge financial losses. This is a show that closed after less than 200 performances. Financial losses were estimated to be around $11 million. It's one of the worst financial flops in Broadway history. And yet, it's been one of the top 10 most performed musicals at high school since the early 2000s. Like I said, Seussical on Broadway was a financial flop. It had brief stints as a touring production in the early 2000s, and an off-Broadway scaled-down version made the rounds in the mid-2010s. Internationally, it had a brief stint on the West End in 2012 and 2013. In 2018, Seussical opened off West End at the Southwark Playhouse in London. It only ran for 7 performances. Most recently, Seussical opened at the Lyric Theatre in South Africa, where it ran for a few weeks in December 2019. But I don't think there will be any revivals of Seussical in the US anytime soon. And honestly, I think it's better that way. Seussical is at its core a kids' musical, because, I'll say it, the premise is kind of ridiculous. A musical based on the works of Dr. Seuss, and it's completely sung through, and the Cat in the Hat is there as a god of chaos? It's ridiculous, but that's the great thing about kids. They're so earnest in their attempts. There are tons of videos of Seussical productions online, and if you go and watch them, the kids are really giving it their all. They are truly in character 100% of the time, nothing but genuine heart. And sure, the productions with adults are trying their best. They're certainly more in key and on time than the kids' productions, but there's this underlying shame to a lot of the performances, a little tongue-in-cheek nod to the audience that they know that what they're doing is ridiculous. Like, yes, I am a man in my 40s, dressed as an anthropomorphic cat from a children's book. But with the kids, there's none of that winking to the audience. That is the Cat in the Hat, and he is giving it his all. And truthfully, I think that's what Dr. Seuss would have wanted. You know, this is the second time I'm filming this section because my computer straight up died and I lost all the footage from this section of the video. And the first time I filmed it, it took me like 7 minutes to talk about the Pocketbook of Boners because I kept laughing. And that was going to be the stinger, was going to be a compilation of my funniest breaks saying boners. But that footage is lost now, so instead you just get me explaining that to you. I'm sure it's equally as funny. Back up your hard drives, kids. Back up your hard drives.